Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are today. Welcome to the first Class of 2020 Virtual Summit. My name is Yoony Kim. I am Managing Director of the Class of 2020. Please do feel free to check in the checkbox so we can actually welcome people when they join one by one. 10 years ago, the Class of 2020 was founded with an aim to solve student housing challenges during economic crisis. We grew with the community as a European think tank shaping the future of living, working, and learning. As our name represents, the year 2020 is our graduation year. What a year we have chosen to graduate. As the Class of 2020, we had been experiencing a steep learning curve together with our community. The exciting learning pathway we have planned for our graduation year got abruptly disrupted 10 weeks ago. The international mobility that we were looking forward to in order to have face-to-face learning with you got canceled. It was planned for that we were going to visit the university cities, which we will actually visit virtually as well. However, we have not stopped nor changed our study plan. We decided to convert our classes to remote learning from home because learning continues, and more importantly, because we believe learning should continue, especially during these uncertain times. All sounds very familiar, no? As this is the story for our students. And just like them, we remain resilient and embrace innovation as a learning community for us and for the future generation we serve. The biggest takeaway we have learned so far is the extent to which all of the stakeholders are intertwined and how blended living, learning, and working became. The Class Virtual Summit will be centered around exactly that aspect, and we will touch upon blended future with the industry leaders from higher education and student accommodation. The topic will not be focused around COVID. Of course, we'll mention it, but it will be about different co. It will be about collaboration and co-creation. We also want to use this opportunity to thank the partners for your continuous support. And today, we kickstart our virtual class in Spain, powered by Ask4 and the Student Hotel. Thank you. We would also like to extend our appreciation to the Pi News and PropertyEU for being our media partner to amplify our key learnings. Without any further ado, let's travel to Spain, one of the Europe's favorite study destinations that welcomed around 800,000 international students this academic year in 76 universities and 94,057 beds of purpose-built student accommodation. Before we actually begin, I want to share some practical information as well. There is a Q&A tab that you can actually see underneath the screen. Please use that tab to post your questions to the experts. And there will be 2 polls that we will apply during the session. And it's just a click away, so please do spare your time. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Philip Hillman, Chairman of Living Capital Markets of JLL, who will guide us as a co-moderator for this journey. Hello, Philip. You are muted.
That's never happened before.
Hello, Philip. Welcome to the Class Virtual Summit. And we are in Spain, huh?
Yeah, here I am in Madrid. Well, not really, but delighted to have the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite countries and in particular to have the chance for you and I to meet some people who are really doing some amazing work in Spain and in the student housing world.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we were super excited that we planned to travel to Madrid this March, which couldn't really happen. But that city where Greystar were actually going to host our regional summit. And we may not be able to be there physically. But before we wait until the lockdown is eased, we would like to also invite Juan and Jeffrey live from Madrid at the new Greystar Become Madrid property set to open September 2020. Hey, Juan and Jeffrey, hello, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Philip. Hello, Yoony. Congrats for your graduation.
Thank you. We are still on the way. We are still earning the credit via virtual learning, of course. But it's a beautiful background, which is live, right? It's in Madrid.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, welcome to our new project in Madrid, the Become Paseo de La Habana. Yeah, this is a live. I mean, it's not one of these backgrounds created by the internet, so it's real. And yeah, welcome everybody to our new project.
It looks like a beautiful weather there as well. Such a pity that we couldn't be there physically. But anyhow, since we cannot be there physically, I would like to invite you to actually show us around with your new development. So for that, we will also play a beautiful video that you have created. Please walk us through what we are seeing in the video.
Sure. So yeah, this is the new brand we have launched in Spain. Become. These are the images of the site in Madrid, which is located in the north of Madrid in the Chamartín neighborhood. Yeah. When we created the brand, we thought a lot about what would make us different, and I think it's not. Oh.
It's frozen.
Oh,
there you go.
Yeah, so we thought a lot about the design of the space, and the main features is, I mean, we have almost 3,000 square meters of communal areas. Look at that stunning views of Madrid from the rooftop. Swimming pool. There's an amazing garden full of landscaped areas. But most importantly, all these communal areas are very flexible, so they're designed so that they can be a study room in the morning, a yoga class in the evening. It's a very flexible space. All the rooms are clusters, and there are some communal kitchens shared by limited number of rooms, which actually nowadays with COVID is I think a very good thing. So students here have a flexible offer of food, so you can have full board or half board on the cafeteria. I think that's frozen. No, or you can use the communal kitchen, so you can manage your own food service, and that's also in the tagline. The co-live, co-create, co-learn is about also learning all these new experiences and joining this very exciting community.
I think I even missed out because I was so excited about your property. Juan is the managing director of Greystar Spain, and Jeffrey is the managing partner by Urbania. I am a marketeer by training, so I'm super curious about the brand. What does the tagline co-create, co-live, and co-learn mean?
Well, we're trying to incorporate here the concept of community, but a vibrant community. So the prefix co and the infinity sort of tagline is telling you about movement, about exciting things to learn. And when we were sharing the space, as I said, the facility is also designed around a number of communal spaces in the ground floor. It's a pity you can't see it, but they're scattered around the site, so you can move from the study room over there into the gym, back out into the garden. So there's corridors connecting gardens.
Mm-hmm.
There's a pool area over here. You can go up to the rooftop, So yeah, it's a community which will be managed by these people here, by Greystar. They're creating all these amazing activities. Yeah, the space itself, it has sort of two dimensions. So the individual dimension, the room itself, we spent a lot of time working on ergonomics, working on soundproof, for instance. So we have the highest standard of soundproof. I think we're on close to 60 dB, where it's 45 the minimum. So that we placed a lot of importance there. But then all these communal spaces have been designed to have that community experience also.
Okay. I mean, when this COVID situation broke in March, I mean, we were really worried about uncertainty, but uncertainty is still there. But we started talking about the new normal. How have you adopted to creating a new normal? Has any changes been made? Has the preferences of the students have changed in terms of living and learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have some issues during March and April, but what probably was a very negative outlook back in March, as we are starting June, things are starting to look a little bit more positive, right? How is the new normal going to look like? Probably we're still a few weeks in the future to know, but I can tell you that leasing is pretty strong at the moment. So students want to go back to, physical lectures. They want to be in the campuses. They want to be with their peers. So that is very, very positive. We are experiencing a very, very strong leasing season at the moment. What we do see as well, that yes, there are some questions about how, if we have double beds in a room, how we're going to coexist. Do we have the 2 meter difference, Jeffrey? That
Of course we do.
probably we are not fulfilling here. That's those questions, and yes, we are making changes in the way that the projects are clean and the way that we're using the communal areas. But I think probably today the message is a bit more positive than probably what it was 4 weeks ago. And what we're learning is that things are changing every week. For me, the key takeaway is that the initial shock was about health and safety for our teams, our students. Then we moved to, are we able to pay the bills? How is your liquidity and how is your cash position? And now it's all about fundamentals, and I think the fundamentals of the Spanish student housing sector remain very strong. I think Madrid will come out of this stronger than before, and you will see a consolidation, certain themes that we were experiencing before COVID. So I remain very, very positive about the future.
Okay, thank you. Philip, do you have any questions?
Yes, I was just wondering what sort of mix of students you anticipate in this building, domestic, international, Erasmus, and so on.
Yeah, so as we are approaching this particular leasing season, I think we're going to be heavily dependent on locals and at a lesser extent, I would say Europeans from the European Union, right? I think it's too early to tell if perhaps the Anglo-Saxon students will be back to Spain at the moment for the things that we all know. And historically, Spain had a very low, penetration of Asian students. So we will rely fundamentally on locals and those countries in Europe where the countries opening their borders.
But just ignoring the current situation, it seems a building that would be good for international students as well.
Yeah, well, that was the plan is to attract as many international students as possible. Also, to make that community more dynamic. I think it's the full experience is to be able to share with people from different backgrounds, different nationalities. So we welcome, of course, all the international students. This area of Madrid is close to some of the universities like IE, which attract most of the international students. Actually, IE are on probably 80% of internationals already. So yeah, probably not next year because of what Juan mentioned about the situation and the traveling issues. But yeah, certainly going forward, we expect a very high percentage of international students joining us.
It's wonderful to hear. We will see you again for now. We will move on with our program and we'll welcome you back during our Q&A session. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your beautiful property.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Yoony. Thank you, Philip.
And one of the advantages of having the virtual learning is that we can really hop from one place to the other instantly. So we now want to travel from Madrid to Barcelona, 600 kilometers away instantly, to welcome Pia Moret Garballo. Sorry if my pronunciation was not necessarily correct. Hello, Pia. Please do unmute yourself. Yes.
Hello, here I am.
Hello, Pia. Can you start by briefly introducing yourself?
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this virtual class of 2020. It's a real class of 2020. Although I don't have anything behind me, I am in Barcelona, I promise. I live very close to Sagrada Familia, and well, here the weather is beautiful and is all very green because we had a lot of rain these days. So not surrounding, but I can tell you about this beautiful city where I live. Well, I work for the government of Catalonia for the Inter-University Council, which is quite unique in the Spanish university organization. And what the council does is to coordinate the system of the universities in Catalonia. We have here, and also advises the government in all kind of university matters. I am the head of the office of the Inter-University Council. I am in charge of the international promotion of the universities of Catalonia. Well, I would like to just to give you an overview of this system, which is made up of 12 universities, 7 public ones, 4 private ones, and 1 online university, with about 265,000 students. Well, in the international, well, if we talk about internationalization of our university system, since 2017, we have been working together to promote this quality system, and we have been present in all the congresses and fairs all over the world. And well, the most prestigious ones that I'm sure you know, EIA, Urbania, and NAFSA. And also we have taken advantage of this traveling to build a network with all our alumni community. The international community of students is about an 11% of this amount of students I told you. It's about 26,000 international students. Not so much at the degree level, but very much at the master level. We have 43% of international students at the master level, and also that can be also interesting for this, what we are talking about now here. We also have a lot of students coming from other cities and areas in Spain for the master studies, and well, it's about the 13% of these numbers. If we talk about mobility, as you said before, Kim, well, Spain is one of the favorite destinations, but also Barcelona and Catalonia. Generally speaking, we have had about 11,000 students coming for the last academic year. We have data, and we have about 8,000 students going out. If we talk about the countries of origin, they mostly come from the United States of America for the study abroad program. And then if we talk about Europe, it would be Italy, Germany, France, well, then Netherlands and UK. And for our students, the most popular destinations are France, Italy, the UK, and Germany. Well, by universities, the universities that have a largest community of international students are University of Barcelona, Autònoma de Barcelona, and Pompeu Fabra, which is a very small university, but with a lot of international students. Well, this would be more or less the situation we had before the COVID. And it has had, as everywhere else, several impacts on the system because since the 13th of March, there are no presential lectures at the universities. Universities are closed, and they will be closed till September for academic purposes. Well, we have had to decide about how to move from presential to online teaching. I like to call it emergency remote teaching. It's not a proper online learning process, but it's been successful, and we will be able to evaluate and assess all the students online, as we truly believe in Bologna process, and then we truly believe that continuous evaluation can be possible. Well, for the international students, we have had two possibilities. One, if they wanted to go back to their countries, they could follow online lessons also from their countries, or they just could follow the lessons from Barcelona, like all the other local students. And well, also, of course, another impact that's been important, I have mentioned it before, is that we haven't been able this year to attend any of these conferences. And the biggest impact is that Barcelona had to host the EIA conference next September. And first we tried to postpone it to October, but finally we have decided just to do it in 2022 because arrangements were made already with Göteborg. That's going to be next year conference. So hopefully we hope we will see all the international community in Barcelona in 2022. We have been working very hard to organize this conference, so a lot of work has been done, and so it's something that's already done, and well, we look forward a nice conference in the future.
It was such a disappointment that it has been cancelled. We were anticipating
yes,
to come.
I was very disappointed myself.
Yeah, but having said that, future forward, I mean, now this is the situation, everyone is adapting. But of course, the big question is, what is announced or anticipated plan or scenario, if any, for the next academic year, in your perspective?
Yes. Well, I just wrote down some reflections about what can be not solutions, but ideas and trends in our system that things can happen in the near and not in the very long term. Is almost impossible to make that kind of predictions, but at least for next year. Well, the very good news is that the national agencies and also the Commission is supporting with funding and recognition the blended mobility. That's really good news for our system, because most universities, what they are planning to do for first semester is kind of blended mobility, which will concentrate, depending on the evolution of the pandemic, a lot of virtual learning and then presential at the end, or the other way around, depending on the situation September on. Well, the emergency remote teaching has been excellent as an emergency solution, but is not online teaching, as I said before. So if we want to experiment more on learning teacher, we will need more resources, planning, and well, people to design those programs. And in the international area, this is gonna be through COIL. COIL allows collaborative online international mobilities, and well, some of our universities are already doing that. Pompeu Fabra University is very active, and also Universitat Rovira i Virgili. And this is something that possibly is going to be spread a bit more all over our system, to have really quality online teaching. That would be one of the main ideas. We won't go all of us and everything to online, but maybe we will think about more online quality teaching.
Yeah, I mean, it's also still a very uncertain period, and we don't necessarily know what the future will hold, but it's always nice to hear your expert opinions on what we can expect, at least at the time being. But unfortunately, I have to say see you again for now. We will welcome you back in the Q&A session. And you also mentioned something very important about collaboration, which is basically the key, we feel, to going through this crisis together, and for the future generation, of course. So I will see you again very soon. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise. And since we asked Pia a question about next academic year, we want to launch our first poll, which should appear on your screen by now. Could you please click on what you believe the international student enrollment in the academic year 2020 and 21 will be like? While doing so, we talked about collaboration. And collaboration is not only meaning collaboration within the higher education institutions, but between different sectors. And now it is the perfect time to bring it up again, because now living and learning situation is completely blended. So I would like to invite Philip to share his view and his expertise on the Spanish market. Hi, Philip.
Hi, Yoony. Thank you very much. Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Philip Hillman, pero ahora en inglés. I think it'd be better in English, basically. So good to see everybody. Good to see so many familiar faces logging in as well. The one question I do want to go back to ask Pia later on is what she thinks the experience will be of the individual students. Will they have much face-to-face contact in this coming year? But we'll come back to that, because I meant to just to cover briefly now about real estate in Spain, and particularly student housing. And for the last few years, I've been saying to many people that Iberia has some of the best student housing opportunities in Europe. It's a really dynamic market. The actual student numbers look really healthy. It's an expanding student market. And there is great potential to grow the international picture. So we could just move on to the next slide. We've got a tremendous number of students in Spain, 1.6 million students. And it's also one of the more attractive for foreign students, particularly those that have the Spanish-speaking connection. And it's notably popular with Erasmus students, the largest destination for Erasmus students in Europe. There are quite a number of high-ranking universities in Spain that would pull not only domestic students, but again, also international students in. So we have felt for a long time that it was pretty likely that a culture that's been changing in Spain over the last few years will continue. That culture originally was very much go to your local university and study, live at home with your parents perhaps, or perhaps stay with a religious organization in their halls of residence. But we've seen a big expansion in the purpose-built student accommodation sector over the last few years. And as I'll be showing you here, I think there's going to continue to be quite a continued expansion. We have got a ratio of about 17 students for every PBSA, purpose-built student bed. That's a really healthy ratio. My colleagues in Spain, the likes of Nick Ride, who's just on paternity leave, Manuel Saldana, and Fede, have been working on some statistics in terms of how many beds they think there really is a demand for. And they reckon there's 430,000 or so of beds, latent demand for beds. So it looks like, you know, there could be several years of development yet before we're getting anywhere near to approaching a mature market, perhaps like we have in the UK. In Spain, we've got a mix of the modern purpose-built PBSA, which is about 83%, but then we also have the Colegios Mayores, a much more traditional model, although there are some more modern ones being built there, but on the whole, traditional, organized traditionally by the church, and 17% of beds in those halls, that's still going to be quite a large proportion. And of course, also in Spain, we have a lot of real estate in the student sector is held on concessions. Organizations like Reza have the majority of their accommodation on a concession basis with the university for a fixed period of time, and then they would hope potentially to renew at the end of that. So next slide, please. In terms of the market overview, we've mentioned 1.6 million students, and we've got a very fast growing number of masters and PhDs. PhDs, you can see 1.3% growth, 2.3% in masters. I think that reflects to a degree what Pia was saying just now about the growing importance of postgraduate study in Spain. Numbers of enrollments prior to the COVID had increased by nearly 1%, and student numbers by region, we've seen strongest growth in the Valencian community of 2.8%, but also 1.1 in Basque Country and 1.3 in Madrid. Next slide, please. So looking at the actual accommodation that's been provided, back in 2016, we saw about 88,000 students. And by 2022, we're projecting 115,000 students. So we're seeing quite considerable growth. We're seeing unsatisfied demand, as mentioned, for some 432,000 beds. And the unsatisfied demand, is still increasing. It's gone up 5.2% since last year. And that's split between domestic students who need accommodation, who are perhaps studying away from home, 355,000 students, and 120,000 international students. And so we had been predicting strong growth on that, and it'll be interesting to see the panel's thoughts on growth in that looking ahead. So next slide, please. In terms of where the beds are being built, you can see the spread. For a long time, we were focused really on those top tier cities of Madrid and Barcelona, but we are seeing quite a rapid expansion now into tier 2 cities and potentially tier 3 cities. But by 2022, we're predicting another 21,305,000 beds on 65 schemes, 65 projects. Will COVID affect that? Possibly some, but most of these are projects which are starting now or have already started. And so whilst there perhaps may be some delay, it's likely that that figure will be reached. And despite the uncertainty, we think there will be continued further growth in Spain for some time. So that's a very quick canter through what is actually a very dynamic market. And prior to this whole COVID business, you know, the outlook was extremely positive. I would say probably a much more positive outlook than in many other countries in Europe. Although it's fair to say that, you know, coming from a perspective of the UK, where we have a pretty mature market, we are still seeing a market that has potentially 10, 15 years or so to develop to the same sort of densities of development that we've seen in the UK. But it really does look as though there will be strong further growth. Yoony.
Thank you. This is a great moment because you just shared your expertise on Spanish market. So we want to ask the audience about what they feel about the COVID impact on our industry. So you will be seeing now in your screen the second question, which you will take only one click away to answer. So we can actually share the results at the end of the session. And while doing so, we will be welcoming our panelists so we can actually discuss further about now and future forward. We'll be welcoming Ari, CEO of Collegiate. We'll be welcoming Charlie, CEO of the Student Hotel. We'll be welcoming Christopher, Director of Growth and New Business of GSA. We'll also be welcoming Christopher, Managing Director of Spain, CORESTATE Capital Partners. So our panelists are joining one by one now. And I would also love to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, also with a little explanation about the amazing background that you have chosen to showcase us. I will start with Charlie, who joined first on this panel. Charlie, could you briefly explain yourself and also the background and how you're experiencing this situation?
Yes, thanks for the intro. And this is my first online virtual webinar, so I'm enjoying it, to be honest. It's running pretty smoothly. You don't have to worry about too much checking other stuff as well, so it's also quite useful. Yeah, I'm Charlie MacGregor, of course. I started the Student Hotel a number of years ago. We are a hybrid hospitality group, so we focus buildings. We buy our own buildings, we own our own buildings, and we operate them. We operate with a hotel license. We generally look for buildings of 400 or 500 beds, and we have a hybrid model. So that means that in the academic year, we allocate most of our rooms to long stay students. We also have, during the academic year, all rooms available for young professionals, co-living rooms, and we have hotel rooms as well. And then when the students go traveling or go home in the summer, we allocate those rooms to hotels. So we flex around. The background you're seeing is in Barcelona, one of our student properties called Marina. This is, I thought, an apt background as well for today's setting, if not now, when, never waste a good crisis and all that stuff. And I think what we're seeing as a student hotel in this situation is indeed the hybrid model. We think is ensuring that we're able to remain open and able to hopefully ride out this storm very well. I hope, but we'll touch on that later in the day.
Thank you. Ari, could you also introduce yourself and the background?
Yeah, Ari, don't step backwards, will you? I'm a bit worried.
Hi guys, I'm Eric Cuanalo, Chief Executive of Collegiate. We are, the background is a scheme of ours in Valencia called Marina Real, and it's got a nice pool. It looks like a little bit of vertigo when you look down on it from here. I hadn't realized I just got asked to put a background down, and I thought it would be quite a nice one to have. Great to hear the news in Spain about, no deaths, for the first day from COVID, which is helping from our view with sentiment. And also we opened our central office up in Madrid again yesterday, along with our UK offices, and that's a nice move sort of forward. We operate across Europe, as many of you know, and a lot of our stock actually is studio stock, which gives us different challenges and opportunities compared to others, but probably a slightly different perspective in the crisis now.
Thank you. Now we would like to invite, we have two Christophers. So first, CORESTATE Christopher, could you introduce yourself? And I don't think you have much to explain about the background, but could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, well, I'm Christopher. I'm the Managing Director of CORESTATE Spain, which is the local affiliate of German-based CORESTATE Capital Group, which is a big investment and asset manager in real estate. And one of our focuses is PVSA and micro living. We are in total with our wholly owned entity CRM from the UK, managing roughly 30,000 beds all across Europe. And Spain is a bit of a smaller market still. We started into this market probably 3 years ago. We've so far developed 700 beds, and we've got another 1,400 in development pipeline currently, which we'll ultimately manage under our own brand, Unique. You've seen before that I tried to put a background and have something nice, flashy, and colorful, showing our latest residence that we opened just in February in Seville. Didn't work. So, I've gone all hush-hush here, and this is my home office right now.
Thank you. Last but not least, GSA, Christopher.
Hi, so my name is Christopher Holloway. I'm the Director for Growth and New Business in GSA. I'm based in Madrid. I also act as Managing Director of GSA in Spain. And we are a global operator of student accommodation. We have currently 23,000 beds in 65 properties around the world in 8 different countries. Spain is one of our cornerstone countries, and we currently have operations in Madrid, Barcelona, and Alcalá de Henares, and we will be looking to add to that in a very short space of time. And yeah, great to be here. Thanks very much for inviting us.
And your background?
Yeah, so the background we have here is the reception area of our Garbí property in Barcelona. I also have the virtual haircut on as well, because I couldn't get a virtual hairdresser. So this is, I'm afraid, 11 weeks of lockdown.
Thank you so much. Philip, we've prepared a lot of questions to the panelists.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they're ready for it. Well, if I can just start a general question, and I'll let whoever of you wants to reply. Prior to all this COVID business, how are things looking from your perspective in the Spanish student housing market? I've commented, I really would like to hear it from you guys. How are bookings looking? How was development and growth looking?
I'll go first if you like. We were way ahead. We were way ahead. We knew we'd be ahead, but we were so far ahead of where we thought we would be. We were doing really, really well. So our curve was, we've blown it out the park, and then all of a sudden, 10, 11 weeks ago, everything just ground to a halt. We have been stagnant ever since. We are getting inquiries, and we are, selling beds, but it's very, very slow, unfortunately. We have managed, though, to maintain most of that initial advantage. And so we're still, like Juan Acosta mentioned earlier, feeling very confident for next year, but with probably a different student mix than we would normally have had.
Did your international students stay in the accommodation?
Some did. Some were advised to return home, particularly the Americans were advised to return home. Some were unable to return home because of other individual factors. One girl, for example, her parents were working as missionaries in Tanzania, and they decided that for safety reasons, you know, that she would be better off staying with us. And so they were like that. There were multiple stories.
Eri, what was your experience on the booking side and also for the room types?
For us, I suppose we have helped with a lot of new buildings in Spain, and we were worried about how all these new buildings would start to sort of settle down as they came into the market. I think, as many of us expected, new buildings entering into new cities would have a slow stabilization, you know, we'll get acclimatized a little bit more slowly. But what was great is that by last year, we'd achieved a sort of a level of full occupancy that we expected, a stabilization. And like Christopher, we were way ahead this year. People understood the product, understood the offering a lot more. And yeah, sadly, a lot of that has gone in terms of not cancellations, but a big drop off in further bookings as uncertainty, you know, remains. In different cities, we have different sort of mixes of international and local students. So, for example, in Madrid, most of our students are actually nationals. But in places like Valencia, we have most of our students international. So there we only have about a third of nationals, and that's where we expect to see a bigger impact, you know, compared to cities like Madrid. And as Christopher mentioned, probably the first strong reaction in terms of people being pulled out was from the States.
Charlie, what was your experience pre-COVID, and how are things looking as regards the future with international students in particular?
Yeah, I think the same as you know, Christopher and Eri. I think there's we were ahead of our budget. I think most of us had sort of a budget and bookings for last year were on top of that, so that was great. You know, we had also a number of students who left for various reasons, some taking their stuff with them, some leaving their stuff behind, thinking it was a temporary thing. So, you know, I think we've got 600 rooms open in Barcelona. It's been open for a long time, so it's a well-established property. The students, universities know it. The other three projects that we have are construction sites or going through planning permission. So, you know, Madrid, our building there was closed down temporarily at the start of the crisis and then opened back up again. So I think, you know, we tend to think that the sort of Barcelona project that we've got, which has now got its building permit, and San Sebastian as well, we'll probably get a benefit when we're speaking to the builders in terms of building price. So the internationalization, yeah, for sure, there's an element that's gone out of that. I personally see it as a good opportunity to market to the local, to the domestic students, to really help that wave of education. And in Spain, you know, is way ahead of Italy, for example, in that education of what are the advantages of sleeping in a PBSA building operated by one of us guys, you know. So I think there's a good opportunity there to reach out to a new set of students. Of course, that will probably mean that we're not hitting the revenues that we hit last year. I think interesting, you know, we've always talked about student accommodation being recession resistant, and I still say that it is. We've learned that it's not pandemic resistant as everybody else. But, you know, I think this year will be, you know, the 2021 year will be a slightly difficult year for us all. but then, you know, we'll rebound tenfold, especially when you see that the real recession will catch up with us, and that's when you can probably expect a resurgence in student numbers from all over the world.
Yeah, and Chris, you've got a number of developments underway at the moment, haven't you, in Spain?
Yes.
Have you found this construction severely disrupted with supply of materials, etc.?
Well, I mean, we are really, this has caught us a bit, almost in a sweet spot, as you could say, right? We had our one residence in Seville opened in February, and we were going, you know, sort of in a pre-opening, soft opening period. So we didn't have too high expectations, and, you know, what we suffered was, you know, what we suffered, but it wasn't as serious. In terms of our pipeline, most of our projects are in licensing stage. So we don't have any ongoing construction. I think the construction would have gone on fairly well from what I've perceived. Most of the administrations have worked throughout, some of them, some haven't, but trying to catch up. And we're not really suffering any delays in kicking off constructions. So that's really, you know, being between construction and the operations and all that, I think this is probably not as bad a moment as it could have been, potentially. So I'm not too unhappy, and we're going to kick off construct 3 or 4 construction sites now this year. Hopefully there won't be a second wave, and hopefully, you know, people will come show up on site, and hopefully prices will give it a little bit more even before we contract now.
Thank you. I was particularly into, Charlie, in that comment that you made just now about reconnecting with sort of the domestic student and connecting to students you might not have reached before. And I just really want to put that one to all of you. Do you think that that's going to be a long-term change, that maybe the focus for marketing purposes and also in connection with your liaison with universities will be much more about getting more of those domestic students? Chris or Eri?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think the objective has always been that we all want to grow the domestic market. We just know that they take a bit longer to acclimatize to the type of products that we're offering. I think this is a journey we've been through in the UK and so on, that as you innovate, it's easy for the internationals to recognize this product that's marketed internationally, that's marketed online, that's new, and it's a bit slower to educate the national students that this is a new alternative on their doorstep, because they haven't seen it before. You know, they would probably become also early adopters if they were traveling internationally, but nationally it takes time. But yes, I think this will accelerate that essential requirement to have more domestic students in our properties, particularly as the pipeline grows.
We've never favored international students. We never deliberately marketed to international students. I'm talking about GSA Spain specifically. We've always felt that the bulk of our, the core of our business was domestic students. We've always had a number around about the 70 to 80%, depending on the building, of domestic students, and that gives us enormous stability over time as well. Internationals come and go, and the domestic students, once they come, they tend to stay at least for 2 years, if not longer in many cases. So that's not going to really represent a change of strategy for us. What I can say, though, is what we're going to see is that those domestic students who ordinarily would be going abroad will now be staying and studying in Spain. And that will be true of every other country. And so there will be, whilst there will be a reduction in the number of net income of international students, there won't be the net outflow of domestic students going abroad. So the balance of numbers should be retained, more or less. And they may choose to do some of those studies in different cities.
What about the risk of students deferring, if they have that option, till they can have a more normal first year experience? What do you feel about that?
I quite honestly don't expect that. In my humble opinion, I would say, you know, why should they? I mean, you know, the locals definitely not. I mean, they're already suffering, and I think this is being perceived as a bit of a time lost. The whole COVID affair, the students have lost, pupils at school have lost time. I think there's no real, to waste more time. It's rather than, let me get going. And now I think semesters are probably, they're getting out of schools later this year. The summer will be shorter, but I perceive, and we're seeing that really in the reservations that we're receiving. They're obviously not as good as they could have been, but they're better than what I was worried about probably 6 weeks ago. So I don't think there's much of a deferral into not even the nearer future.
Spain's always had a big proportion of Erasmus students, a big destination, albeit that's only part of the income of most schemes. Is that going to be a particular hole for you guys? Anyone to answer that?
Yeah, I can take that one if you like. I think what we see is that there seems to be more demand for the 2-semester bookings, so 10 months or 12-month bookings. A lot of universities are closed or offering online services for the first semester. So I think we see that the type of contract that people are looking for is much longer term, because they're saying, okay, well, I sign up for a 4-year course or a 1-year course, whatever it is, but they're looking for that whole experience. The Erasmus first semester seems to be on hold or being held virtually, but we don't see much requests coming in for those bookings at the moment.
Okay.
I think that's a very important point, as Chris mentioned as well. I think we find it from the UK and everywhere we've got stuff that students are seeing this as a very irritating time. It's putting their life on hold. They all want to carry on and get back to study. However, the more optional courses like Erasmus or shorter courses, I think certainly they will be impacted a lot more. But what we see is that in our experience across the different countries, that there is a bit of a pause in bookings. And we think that will pick up as we get more certainty about university plans, about international travel, etc., as well, because international travel will affect the psychology of even nationals moving around. But we think that we will get, students need to get on with their lives, and they're impatient to do so. And quite frankly, this is not affecting them. There's not any level of mortality amongst that sort of population. So they want to get on. They don't want to be cheated any longer.
For the last few years, student housing design has been coming on, and a lot of it has been focused around communal areas, with perhaps more focus on the overall community feel of the building than perhaps going back to the early 90s in the UK when it was just all a bit boxy. Are we going to have to change all that now? Are we going to have to go back to social bubbles? Studio rooms, which the universities used to hate because they didn't like the idea of people being locked away in their room. Well, how are you going to deal with the cluster flat kitchens? How are you going to deal with catered halls where you have catering? This is more complex than just an office building, isn't it? So I'd be interested to hear from any of you what you're going to do that will be very different from last year in the way you operate the buildings.
It's 3 things. I think it's how do we protect our staff first, our students, and then our other stakeholders, which would include suppliers. So it's everything from how do you get parcels delivered, and ensure that they're delivered safely, to how do you provide a 24-hour reception service, how do you disinfect the locks? The list is pretty much endless. I think the first thing to consider is that we have to comply with what the governmental laws are, and those are not yet 100% clear. And so, anything that I say could change tomorrow if the government publishes something saying the opposite. So I just want to sort of start with that caveat. Cleaning is a big one. We have to make sure that we're not just cleaning but disinfecting the areas as well. Probably the frequency will have to increase, and we will have to include PPE for staff for sure, but also possibility of PPE for visitors, and maybe insisting that students have an element of PPE as well. Some of you may know that in Spain, the use of the masks is obligatory in public areas. So it's not just suggested as it is in other countries, but it's actually obligatory. So that's obviously one area. You know, I think you hit the nail on the head with regard to buildings designed to create community, and break down distances now have to be used to create distances. And most of our buildings are catered, and therefore we're looking at how do you structure meal times in a different way, so that, you know, a dining hall that has capacity, or restaurant has capacity for 200 to 300 students can actually accommodate 500 over a period of time. And how do you link that with the students' studies and all of that kind of stuff? Is pretty complicated. I think the biggest and best thing that could happen, nevertheless, is that the universities come out and give a clear indication of when and if they're going to come back, and what they're going to do as well with regard to distancing, classroom sizes and all those, and that will allow us to respond appropriately and plan accordingly. Right now, and you know, it's interesting to hear Pia speak earlier, but right now we are in a situation where we're a little bit in abeyance as well. We don't know exactly what those rules are going to be, but some of the things that we're doing I've mentioned. We have also included virtual receptions in some of our buildings, particularly in the UK, where we've had kind of some, I want to liken it to kind of just a permanent iPad interaction, you know, where somebody is on the other side, possibly even just in the other room, but allowing that social distancing to be maintained. So innovative things like that as well.
May I just add to Philip's question? Just, it's the same context, but there had been some discussions with regards to, I mean, for the universities also, they are questioning how to use their current space to accommodate students when we can even welcome them. And the other question in the other side of the continent is that universities are forcing government to allow international students in with the quarantine measures, and they don't really know how to accommodate those students who come to the country in the quarantine status. Do you have those discussions with the universities to join the forces together to speed up the decision making as an industry who works together?
I think one of the things that we're finding in the UK is that universities are not very joined up about things. They are very professional in terms of their planning, and they're all coming out and making certain announcements, and we expect clarity from all of them by the 15th of June. And so that's going to be an issue, different universities acting in different ways. And it's going to be a particular problem if you operate in one city and you serve several universities, because the rules that they might have on campus and the guidelines that they set and the protective measures will go above what government says. And we're finding that already. The good thing is that we have done a lot of learning in the UK, because most of our students in the UK at Collegiate have stayed in residence. You know, so we've had to spend a lot of time focusing on keeping staff safe, how we deal with students, day-to-day practical stuff that we've had to deal with all the time that we can begin to adopt in
Thanks.
In
if I,
in other countries that have been.
Sorry, Eri. Yeah. If I could just ask, this term that's just coming to an end soon has clearly been a difficult one for operators and for the investors behind them, in terms of income either being refunded, waived, or just reduced. Looking ahead, you know, it could still be a challenging year with potentially reduced numbers of international students, hopefully good, strong domestic student numbers that might even make up for some of that. I just was curious, really, you've all got very different investors behind you, and some of you have got quite a number of different investors. Could you give us a feeling of the sentiment you're getting from your investors about this sector that we all said was wonderful, recession-proof, etc.? You know, are you getting any kickback?
Well, go ahead, Charlie.
It's a poison question, Philip. No, my investors are amazing. I absolutely. No, I mean we're very lucky. You know, we have a.
They're probably listening, aren't they?
APG, the Dutch pension fund, who of course have a per definition a long-term mentality. Earmont is private equity. You know, so they're shorter term, but they have from the day that they invested in 2014. Really the vision to help us build up a proper business. And that means you need to have a long-term view. You know, there are for sure, as with every crisis, short-term cash constraints, and you're looking to reduce cash leakage, etc. We have, as I'm sure my colleagues in the panel and listening, have also a worst case scenario that there is indeed a second wave, and how do you do that? And you got to plan for that. You know, I do think that there are many opportunities, and I hope that, you know, we as TSH can help some of our partners by maybe, you know, looking to see if we can consolidate together and help some of our maybe not so strongly funded partners come out of this crisis still intact and maybe stronger together. So I think we're so we're doing two things. We're looking at cash preservation, but also what is our plan of attack and how do we grow from this?
Yeah, and Chris, you were going to say something as well?
No, I think actually Juan said it in his introductory note. You know, going through the worries that we're running through this phase. One was like now taking stock, seeing, you know, how are we doing liquidity-wise, and obviously we're all faced with the same thing. You've got your operating costs, you've got your staff there, and you've got whatever, and then you're stuck with somewhere between 2 and 15 students in a residence, so that's probably not going to give you much benefit. And you need to see how much liquidity you have and so forth. And I think when it comes to communicating that, it's really very much a question of what kind of investor you have behind you, right? So I'm looking at so we're talking about Greystar, we're talking about, you know, GSA. This is different kind of money. Our money in our projects is private wealth for family offices. And obviously this is, I wouldn't call it kickbacks, but it's definitely what we're trying to avoid is we're really managing this liquidity thing as best we can in order to avoid what is capital calls eventually. Because when we're running through the end phase basically of a project and we're into the first or second year of the operation and we're about to sell, people are expecting to cash in. And this, instead of cashing in, this is what we call them, say, no, we're not going to give you money, we need money from you. And that shouldn't be, you know, too much. But having said that, I think there's obviously as well the expectation of what's going to happen. Nobody's got the crystal ball. The second wave question is one thing, but we're also perceiving that there's probably going to be a change a bit in that market anyways, as this market with that asset class becoming more recognized, more core. There's an influx of more institutional money, as well, Arian and Christopher can very well tell, and the same as Jeffrey and Juan. So there's going to be more institutional money, and that money, obviously, you know, the losses that we're suffering right now, if they're not losing on all ends, is probably dissolving a little bit in the sheer mass of volume that they have available. Right? It's a bit dependence, right?
I suppose in our experience in dealing with lots of different investors, I think one of the things that that's going to shake out, quite frankly, from this process is that we're slightly unique in the sector, that we have a lot of short-term investors coming in speculatively, as well as the longer-term investors. You know, and I think that that's been a characteristic where short-term people have been able to make money, and long-term people have found the fundamentals very attractive. The fundamentals remain, and I think what this is going to come out, what's going to come out of this is a greater focus on fundamentals, a realization that that these are long-term investments, and that you need to look at it that way, because if you're in a speculative play with this sort of volatility that could happen over the short term, you're going to be exposed.
Philip, shall we invite other panelists to join so we can also run a Q&A session? Time flies with this discussion. So we will be inviting back the older speakers, so anyone can actually respond to the questions selected by our colleagues. If we would love to ask all the questions, but time is just running out, so we will select a few, and the rest of the questions we hope to respond in the class radar, so stay tuned. But while doing so, we would also like to share the result of the 2 polls that we have done. Eleonora, could you pull up the result of the poll, please? So the first question, international student enrollment in the academic year. Majority of them, exactly 50%, responded decrease around 30%. Not necessarily too surprising. We've been hearing that figure throughout the industry over different conversations. Eleonora, could you also put up the result of the second poll, please? This is about the impact that COVID will have in student housing, and what would that be? And 70% of them confirmed that we should also focus on the local student mobility. It could also be that the demographic, the age demographic might also shift a little bit due to economic downturn, possible economic downturn, but the rest of the result we will be sharing via our summary. So are all the panelists in? Yes, speakers and panelists. Okay, so we have several questions, but Philip, you first had a question to Pia.
I did, yes, Pia. I was just wanting to ask you, thank you so much for your introduction to, what it's going to be like, the university experience this coming year. Mm-hmm. What, from a student's perspective, do you think they will see? What will be the university experience? Will there be much face-to-face teaching in small groups in Spain?
Well, as you said before, is nothing certain at the moment, but it looks like it's going to be like that. That all the students, they are looking forward to have face-to-face, learning, but it's not going to be possible to have big classrooms with 80, 90, even less students. So possibly it's going to be a blended system, and they will have face-to-face at least maybe once a week or something like that. That's what we are more or less discussing these days. Someone said before that it's going to be difficult because each university is going to do their own policy. Of course, universities are autonomous to decide which is the best way always. Looking that they have all the health and security measures adopted. But at least for Catalonia, this is going to be more or less all the same for all the universities because of this singularity of the council, that during all this process, all the decisions have been taken together through a consensus and in collaboration.
Juan and Jeffrey, thank you for joining again. This question is not only for you guys, but I really want to ask you this because we just mentioned that possibly there will be a demographic age change in the future. Are you also considering offering your rooms to career starters or young professionals, or is it students only?
Well, I mean, in Spain, the urban planning also leads where how and who is your prospective tenant, right? So it's not like in the Netherlands or in France where the model perhaps is a bit more hybrid. We are offering to a variety of related student themes. So it can be a first year student, second year student, it can be a third or fourth year students, but it can also be somebody who is related to university and wants to stay with us. But at the end of the day, in Spain, you have to be very careful with planning because a student flat is a student flat and a residential asset is a residential asset.
Well, I fully agree with Juan, of course. I think that's one of the things we hope in Spain the authorities rethink. It's all too rigid. It's all, you know, planning here is, you know, the constraint of the tenants you can have on site is very restrictive. The planning is not helping us be more flexible, be more innovative. So I hope that the local authorities think during the crisis of, you know, more flexible ways of of dealing with this matter in the future.
Thank you. Philip, unfortunately, we have to round up pretty soon, but we have room for one more question. Would you like to pose another question to the
got to be the right one then, hasn't it? Okay.
Yes,
Okay, one thing I've been wondering about in Spain is a big hospitality sector that's normally very full of tourists and business people. Assuming that the hospitality sector in Spain is being hit hard, do you anticipate there being a number of opportunities to take over existing hotels or redevelop hotel sites? And from Charlie's perspective, is your hospitality offer likely to change in any way, given the nature of what's going on? But anyway, that's my question.
Maybe I can kick off. What we've done, of course, is we've allocated more rooms to the student sector during this time, because there's limited hospitality travel, as you said. We expect that to pick up the start of next year, really. And again, if I look to myself, also the resistance I have of leaving home and going traveling and stuff like that, I think many people have that. So I think we can shift our allocation around and ride it out. In terms of your very good question about how do we take advantage of this, we will be indeed looking at hotels and seeing if there's hotel chains or individual hotels. We need a good agent. So Philip, maybe if you know anyone that can do that as an introducers, we'd be interested to. But no, I think it's definitely one of our plan of attacks, and certainly a good way to grow quickly.
Interested from others, any others? How do you see this as a real opportunity? Because for me, every time I've talked to developers over the years, they've always wanted a good recession to be able to go out and buy good student sites. So you're probably going to get a pretty big recession. What are the opportunities for you guys to go out and buy sites, hotels, or whatever?
Well, I saw a survey yesterday that suggested that indeed prices are going to reduce, especially on land, which I think would be very interesting. And obviously, we all know that the tourist sector is suffering. Coming back to your initial question of hotels, I mean, we all want to sort of have our very original and proper product, and we want to structure it in a way. We want to have the community experience. We want to have all that. And, so not every hotel really lends it. Obviously, I would hope that we find that perfect, piece of real estate somewhere in one of our destination cities where we can say, okay, we can put 250, 300 rooms, and we're going to have, all the common areas on the ground floor, whatever, at an exceptional price. Something that I wouldn't have dreamed of half a year ago. If you find that, yes. Will it be abundant? I don't know. I think there's going to be NPL deals and all kind of that stuff. So I don't know how quick that market, how dynamic it's going to be. We're greenfield developers. I'd much more back on that, finding probably, better product. And then coming back to what Jeffrey suggested, the public entities are actually reacting. And we know that in many cities, there is dedicated land that we'd love to lay our hands on, which are sort of blocked for specific uses, for whatever purposes, where the public entities could actually help and vacate that. And it could solve, it could be a win-win. We're providing residential product for a specific target group, and I think it could alleviate the situation in many cities, and that is probably rather what I would be banking or hoping for. Banking on, I don't know, because the entities are not that quick and that agile, but hoping for rather than putting my money on steep reductions in prices.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we find dealing with lots of investors across different countries is that we're seeing that the fizz will go out of the market. There's been a lot of fizz, a lot of overvalued land, a lot of overvalued assets, and they will return more to fundamentals. But we do see that potentially land prices might go down if you can find the sites. We see that construction costs will actually go up. In our experience in several of these recessions, the number of main contractors that are viable decreases. And out of the last few, main contract costs go up. And we find that in Italy, find it in the UK, everywhere, as less providers come into play. We're quite lucky in terms of, I think, temporarily, well, hopefully permanently, but our studio favored schemes will make it a bit easier for people to get over some of the worries about being able to isolate yourself. And it's easier to manage when you've got large communal facilities, because you can look at a distance and a little bit more. It's just a little bit easier. But we don't really think that the hotel sector is going to go out. It's going to have serious problems for a little while. Like the restaurant sector, that's probably going to be more effective. Nightclubs are going to be disastrous. Pubs and so on, seriously effective. But we see the opportunity potentially in cheaper land prices and less deals being done.
Okay, Yoony. Oh, sorry, guys. Yes, go on, please. Yeah, Jeffrey and Juan.
I was going to say, I agree with Eri and Christopher. Probably, there will be some opportunities here and there, but I don't think there's going to be a massive opportunity to buy distressed, at least not for the next year or so. Actually, in the last recession, it took us between 2008 until probably 2013 to find the distress. I think it's more a question of working on those possibilities of unlocking that land held by the public authority. So probably we'll see a lot more public-private partnerships and trying to work on that land. I think it's definitely the time for looking into affordability. So we'll, that's going to be, in my opinion, a major issue going forward, affordability of the scheme. Lots of us, we've been doing underwritings, looking at continuous growth. That's probably going to come to an end, and we'll need to work on a different approach to this topic.
Yeah, and affordability, particularly where people all over the world are going to be on potentially lower incomes for some time.
So I would just say, sorry, just that this has been a good time to be globally diversified, where one country has performed better than others and vice. So for us, it's been a good kind of lesson in diversification geographically. And, I completely agree with the guys. We're not seeing that distress or value in Spain yet, but we are seeing it in other parts of the world. And so we're able to divert our attention temporarily, if you like, to other parts of the world where we can create better value faster, but we haven't seen any hotels.
Yeah. I think just one last point on this. I think that part of it, affordability is critical, because so many of the appraisals and projects being issued to market have got unrealistic rents that are never going to be sustainable. They could be achieved in the short term, but they're not sustainable, and unrealistic occupancy levels on those rents, and that all has to rebalance to long-term sustainable prices.
Yeah, unfortunately, we really have to round up now, but we have so many questions that's unanswered. So we will be contacting the panelists and speakers so we can actually have the questions complete when we are sharing our summaries to the participants. So thank you so much, everyone. I mean, it's funny that it was mentioned about diversification. I've heard from the colleagues of the higher education, they're also looking into diversification of supply and demand as well in order to mitigate their risk in the long term. So I think the key basically is to continue the conversation and create the collaboration that works for all the stakeholders. Because one thing that is certain for now is the uncertainty. So all we can actually do is to continue to work together. So thank you so much for everyone who actually joined as our speaker. Thank you so much, Philip, for being such an amazing co-moderator. I will be rounding up this session by introducing how we will continue our journey to learn, because as you said, students are eager to continue learning, and so are we as well. And I hope that you can also join our journey towards the graduation, in which format the graduation ceremony will be in the future. So the next one coming really quickly is on the 16th of June, we will be having our first PropTech Academy, which is open for the partners at this moment, so please register. And June 18th, we'll visit Austria and CEE. And June 30th, we'll visit the Netherlands. And July 14th, we'll be visiting Germany to complete our first phase of the journey before the summer holiday. And we will continue to learn towards our graduation in November, hopefully in the way that everyone can be connected. So thank you so much once again for also sponsors of this event, Ask4, the Student Hotel, and 2 media sponsors, which are the Pioneers and the PropertyEU. And we hope to see you all for the next session. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening, morning, afternoon, or night. And I will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.